What's going on, guys? Phil here, back again today with another video. Today I want to talk about a subject that is very, controversial. It's a little bit out of the news. It wasn't really in the cycle for as long as you might have thought it should have been. But a couple months ago, if you don't remember, Donald Trump was almost shot and killed. He was almost assassinated at a rally, and so that obviously sprung up a lot of conversation about, whether or not that's a good, bad, neutral thing. And the aftermath of the event was kind of insane, especially in the more far left leaning political communities. So back when everything was recent, I was already thinking of considering about putting my opinion out there on what was going on. And I felt that originally my take was a little bit too harsh. And so after a couple months of letting it chill and taking time to think about it, I was very happy when I saw this ShoeOnHead video come out that was talking about criticism about the same exact kind of take that I was, referencing. So I feel like my trajectory on this topic was I began really, really up here, yeah, the inflammatory take is correct. I settled down, saw this video and was like, oh shit, maybe I was right to, take some time to settle down from this and not just respond to it initially, because now seeing some of the other criticism and some of what she has to say in response to people making similar arguments to me, maybe I really was overthinking it. I was overinvested in it. And then with that spiraling in my mind for another month or two, I eventually came back around on the fact that no, actually, I do think that the opinion I had in the very first place was correct. And I do actually, for the most part, agree with the left-leaning political sphere that she is getting critique from in this video. I more so align with them. But I felt that this topic was obviously very controversial and interesting, and it has, split apart sides. It's a very, I don't know, it just seems like a very consequential kind of take to have no matter which way you look at it. So I thought it'd be interesting to talk about. While this video is going to reference the ShoeOnHead video and it's going to reference some of the critique that she was specifically given, I don't want this to feel like it's supposed to be a response directly to her video. I'm not going point by point or person by person that she's mentioning. I'm not really here to defend any of the people that are on, in the clips. I don't know many of them personally, and by personally, obviously I don't know any of them personally, but I don't really associate with any of them or their content outside of watching Shoe's videos sometimes and occasionally going through a couple months of watching Destiny. So outside of that, everyone else that's referenced, I am only taking their point at, kind of face value. I don't know anything about them. So just to get that out of the way. And before we dive into the real issue, the real topic at hand, I just want to say at the beginning that one of the largest points that I'm going to be referencing and making a lot of my conclusions based off of are based on this framing that Shoe has of Corey Competore. Corey Competore is the guy who ended up getting shot, the bystander at the Trump assassination. He's framed as just a guy, just another dude. And a lot of the critics take the stance that him physically appearing at the rally, him having such obvious support for Trump, who there will be hopefully clips or quotes at some point, maybe right here, of one of the most inflammatory candidates ever, the cough cough Hitler clip. And I want to discuss at the onset of this what is causing all these reactions. I've dubbed this the Destiny take, and I believe without any context on the Destiny take in of itself, and then also my kind of interpretation, my little path off of the Destiny take, I believe that's where we have to start this video before we get into specific critiques or specific arguments that some of the people made. So, with all of that set out from the get-go, appreciate, all of the political commentary people who make this possible. Every single one of us, even though they're a lot bigger than me, obviously they should know this. It's very difficult to put yourself out there and talk about things that actually have real world impact, and things that actually can get people riled up, pissed off at you, and sometimes reasonably so. It's difficult to actively want to put yourself in those kinds of environments, or at least I find it difficult for myself to want to do that. But I believe that it's important, and if you have strong opinions, especially on, things that are going to be impacting other people, changing the world, trying to make, the entire point of politics is trying to change the world to be better, quote unquote better. And so, yeah, I just wanted to lay all that groundwork out as you get into the video that, let's try and take not exactly an objective look at this topic, but let's understand that we're talking about a very inflammatory issue. We're talking about something very recent, something very current, something that is going to affect people. And just know go in with a little bit more of a level head of, we're here trying to discuss what leads to these inflammatory takes and whether or not the logic there is consistent or okay. And at the end of the day, whether you agree with my final opinion is not really the point. The point is to showcase why I have arrived to my opinion, so that at least you understand where, the other side is coming from if you are on the opposing side of this issue. And if you're on my side of the issue, then you kind of you're able to reevaluate what you actually believe by seeing some of the logic that I've taken to arrive at the same conclusion. Because a lot of the times, the way that you get to a solution or a conclusion is a lot more important than actually just the conclusion in general. So let's get into discussing the Destiny take. The Destiny take is the take that, especially because we've had Trump in office before, and we were able to see how destructive he could be and how much real power him as the president he actually holds. He tried to get a lot of things started. He made a lot of progress towards tearing things down. And in the beginning of his newest administration, he is over the top tearing things down. During the first administration, he was coping with the pandemic, and he was trying to learn the ropes of politics and test the waters and see what he can get away with without losing support. That at that time, and with that past context of how destructive his first term was, supporting him, and then particularly supporting him so much so that you physically show up to the rallies and are actually there, there's a difference, and you might not think it at first, but there's a difference between supporting a candidate's ideas and talking about them and being a conservative on Reddit, and being a Trump supporter who goes to the rallies, who physically takes time out of their day, probably had to plan a trip, go out there, they took their whole family. There's a different level of support, even though support is a broad term that both of these two, instances of people, they do broadly support Trump, but there's two, you can see the difference in scale there. Because it takes so much more effort to be an avid supporter, a physical supporter, then there's a distinction there that needs to be made. That is the very first kind of concession you have to give the Destiny take if you're going to take it on. Is there a difference between a person who supports Trump and sits on their ass at home and watches TV, and a person who supports Trump so much so that they actually show up? And you can get bogged down into more detail of that, of it matters, was it actually a big expense for the people that showed up? Is it a big trip? Did Trump just happen to come to their government their fucking public speaking place 20 minutes away, and they're like, shit, let's go see Trump? I'm not bogging down to that. I don't really care about that. The intentionality behind it is not really a big deal, but I understand it's a criticism that will probably be brought up. At the end of the day, the first concession that you have to make is that being a more avid supporter, one that is avid enough and into it enough to actually physically go and represent yourself at the rally, because they are supporting someone, and technically the entire party, I will wrap, they're supporting the Republican Party that's putting him up, because they are supporting a movement and a person that has shown to be dangerous, borderline treasonous, felonious, it kind of, the next logical step from that is, if you go and support someone who is all of these things, do you have any responsibility for the fact that something bad might happen? Is it a little bit of a risk that you take on when you go and support someone who is so dangerous that something might happen? And I don't think that that is a bad argument. I think it's fair to say that if you support a very extreme person or party and you go and do public support for that, there is a lot more chance that you face retaliation. Obviously, when you use the word retaliation in this respect, I'm not trying to say that the shooter shot him because he's a Trump supporter, okay? It could be a different situation where let me rephrase that. The fact that it's an accident that he got shot makes the situation even more muddied. It makes it more difficult. But underlying all of that part of the argument that makes it a little more weird, you still can arrive at the idea that if you are an avid supporter of this dangerous party, you physically put yourself somewhere where dangerous things can happen. Is it okay if something dangerous happens and you are the victim? Cutting back in onto the point, anyone who supports Trump, and particularly those who would support him so much so as to go to the rallies, deserve anything that can come to them, anything that may badly impact them that shows up. Because they're supporting such a dangerous party, they are taking on this inherent risk. And the fact that something happened should not be looked upon as like, oh, what a tragedy. It should instead be more looked upon as like a political event, kind of like a political eventuality, you know? When you're in times that are very divided and very, extremist, you're going to have more violence. You're going to have a lot more potential for these sort of things to happen. And so not only not recognizing that danger, that inherent risk, but supporting the person and the party, more particularly the person, who kind of began this whole shift around how politics has become more divisive, more extremist, more violent. If you support that, then you kind of are signing on for the risk that something violent or bad might happen. Although this take and agreeing with that, the entire idea behind it obviously is inflammatory. The very quick draw you can come to is that this take is actually just extreme and it's a call for violence, and it's trying to make it seem okay that, oh, the enemy, quote unquote, like took a casualty, like who cares? I believe that instead of it being just taken at face value as like a call for violence, the amount of overwhelming support that it has seen from the far left, from multiple different content creators, pundits, people like that, if there's so many people coming to the same conclusion, then there needs to be some sort of reason why it has come up. We, at least in my lifetime that I've been politically aware enough to notice, no one in my lifetime has ever called for a president to be shot. No one in my lifetime would have ever considered that being a supporter and being a normal citizen backing a political candidate should ever be in like the line of fire, should ever be the one taking the bullet for the for the politics. And yet we've arrived at this point with Trump and this situation where the idea that a normal supporter, a normal citizen can be injured and it's like kind of righteous, it's kind of okay. That is the fact that has gained so much hold on some of the far left political commentator people. It shows that something new about this situation is different. Something has changed. Something is more drastic. Why now? Why with him? Why is this happening at this very moment? And it has to be that there is some sort of quantifiable difference between administrations and like the relationship between opposing sides in the past and how badly those relationships have like soured now. So this question of why him, why now, can be very, very difficult to answer, but that's what we're about to dive into and try to understand. Why him? Why has he caused this? Why is this happening now? And is there actually something of use, of tangible, like, understanding of political philosophy or people's will behind politics? Or, like, there's got to be something useful within all this mess where these opinions are able to come out and not only just surface and be like, say it was just Destiny that had this take and he gets blown up virally for it because it's wild, but the fact that so many others have also kind of adopted it, kind of gotten to it, and while some of them obviously probably took it just straight from Destiny, they just kind of are listening to who they listen to. I believe that the fact that I was able to get to this conclusion amidst the noise without directly being like a Destiny fanboy or without directly being like a conservative fanboy, like the idea, the fact that hopefully I see myself as fairly normal, that normal people could kind of get to this without much push, is very telling that something is wrong. So let's explore what is wrong. All right, jumping into why him and why now. This is going to be difficult to answer. It's going to be doubly so for those of you that are on the other side of the aisle to become, get on board with me. And it's quadruply going to be difficult for those of you on the other side that have previously supported Trump to understand where I'm coming from. I get that. I'm coming to you not trying to bash you. I'm not trying to put, a lot more tension into the air. I'm coming to you with, this is where I'm at, and I implore you to understand or try to put some time into thinking about the rhetoric that Trump engages in, the dangerous threats about removing citizens, the constant tacit support or outright support for the alt-right that they've used to strengthen their base throughout their, we're almost at 10 years of having to deal with Trump in our political sphere. This is still currently happening, but it's also been happening for years now. His nuzzling up to Russia and other dictators while destabilizing NATO and destabilizing our EU allyships, all of these actions are not the actions of someone who believes in the American experiment. Everything that Trump is doing and has planned on doing and has said so during the campaign directly undermines the values with which American society is built upon. And although he's been able to get enough support from the fringes and the extremists, the fact that many normal Republicans, okay, I'm speaking directly to you, look at me, the normal Republicans out there, you did not have enough issue with all the rhetoric. You didn't see the red flags for the alt-right tendencies and leanings. You on top of the lying and the grifting and the felonies and January 6th, I've been told by people that I have very close to me, friends and family that lean right, that should be okay. You can be friends and care about people that have different opinions than you. But especially when it came to the insurrection, the fact that people weren't even willing to to concede that it was a bad thing that's happening, that's insane, okay? The fact that all of these events have been allowed to happen with no pushback from the typical, normal, everyday Republican base is a tragedy, okay? I'm not trying to push you down. I'm not trying to say the Democrats did better. The Democrats suck too. The Democratic administration's horrible. The people we put up were not very good. Our leaders fucking suck. We're holding silent protests in Congress with little signs instead of fucking doing something about our lives being ruined. I'm willing to admit that. I need you to be willing to admit that you missed something. It's okay to have been got. Okay, propaganda is a strong tool. It's a very strong tool. It's something that we all assume that when we learn about propaganda for the first time in 6th grade, you see the war posters from Soviet Russia, you're like, no one would ever fall for this shit. Yes, they do. Yes, you do. Yes, I do. We all do. Okay? You have to understand that all of these things that we should have been able to identify, we did not identify, and that has what has led us to where we're at now. That is where all of this very negative sentiment comes from. This that starts to boil over into these violent takes, into, you know, at a certain point, violence becomes just what other answer do we have, and people gravitate to that. I'm not saying that's what we should be doing. I'm not saying that's where we should go, but it's where people do go. That as we're living through the future that supposedly the Trump supporters wanted, I can't help but wonder if this Corey guy that got shot, if he would have thought, like, what would he have thought of the world that we're in right now, okay? He, unfortunately, is going to be in the history books as a martyr for this cause. And there is a very real possibility that he shouldn't be. The fact of the matter is, none of us know this guy. None of us knew this guy. And we don't know how politically active he was. We don't know what his takes were. We don't know anything about him. He is just the guy that got shot at the Trump rally, as Shoe tries to portray him as. It's true. He is just that guy that got shot. But we're living in a time where people are going to take him as a martyr. They're going to put all of the bad takes and political philosophies of MAGA, attach it to this guy who unfortunately lost his life at a MAGA event, and they're going to run with it forever. Like, it's horrible that this guy, whether he was the biggest piece of shit in the world or not, his legacy is tarnished forever as the MAGA scapegoat now. And he may not have meant to be that. Let's see. Are these the things that he supported? Were these the values that he actually believed in? Or are all of these things just side effects or things that he wouldn't have noticed or cared about because, you know, whatever his focal issue of choice was more important than all the other side things that Trump does? His exact opinions on topics are, of course, never to be known, but to have his name etched into history as a casualty of the administration seems very sad, because he is now going to be associated with the men in history who are sending us into turmoil. Upon first watching Shoe's video, it really helped me to kind of palate cleanse and reset after a very divisive campaign year. About 2 months before this video had come out, the Destiny take kind of started to gain traction. And during this time, I also happened to be going to, what was it? I went to some event for a friend. Went to my friend's law school graduation ceremony. So me and a couple buds, we go on a trip out in the middle of wherever the fuck, and we end up partying one night. We got a little bit drunk. We end up going back to the hotel. It's like midnight with two of my best friends who don't talk politics almost at all. And we're just sitting there. Somehow all the Trump shit comes up. We start talking about politics a little bit. And this was right when the Destiny video started to get some hype. So I'm sitting there explaining the video, explaining the take, and being like, I'm grappling with this, trying to figure out what I think. Because I really believe it, honestly. I think that they're right. It's hard for me to process because someone that ostensibly is innocent died. But all of the logic makes a lot of sense to me, that obviously if we're in such a strong, horribly divisive like political climate, and you go out and support an extremist character, then there is going to be a chance that you have to like kind of take the fall for that. And I had a very, very difficult time wrapping my head around what I actually believed. I was talking to them and I explained, I think this is true. I kind of get where we're at. I think we're in unprecedented territory for America. We're in a time that, and as we see more and more of what's happening with, you know, present day, the El Salvador incidents, and the threats of putting American citizens, like American criminals, into El Salvadorian prisons, like we're unironically in concentration camp territory. And this was months ago when I'm sitting there thinking to myself, are we at a point where we're going to get to this kind of thing? Because, like I said, everyone had the understanding that MAGA had like very far right leaning support. It had white supremacist support. And so whenever that's in the conversation, you have to think, are we getting towards a Nazi situation? And I didn't want to believe it. No one wants to believe that. No one wants to think that. That's not like, it's not where you want to be. But as we've gotten more and more evidence, it seems like that's where we're headed. That's where we're at. We are in the beginnings of the next like Nazi era. Except now we're not in Germany, we're in America. I was grappling with this months prior to this video. And when I saw this video at first, it helped me calm down and recontextualize. It helped me feel better about laying down arms, you know, kind of like while I'm having this discussion in my head trying to figure out what's right, it's like I'm polishing my gun, being ready to go fight for my side. And then eventually I was like, maybe I'm overreacting. You put your gun down. It's resting above the mantle now, and you're just thinking, let's watch this ShoeOnHead video and actually, you know, now we'll reset and we'll be okay. We understand our point. We fought through it enough by ourselves. Let's get some more understanding of what critics are saying and why our argument's wrong and what the other argument is. And let's see where we're at. So, I felt that this video was an incredible breath of fresh air when it first came out. I needed it to get me out of the funk of we lost, things are really bad, and it made me hopeful that things would not be as destructive going into Trump's second administration. The far left opinion that is showcased by a lot of the far left, you know, creators in this video is extreme, and even though I tend to watch mostly left-leaning media, I thought maybe I was wrong because the common sentiment felt outside of the far left circle was not this. But this is the only thing I'd really indicted myself in. So I was like, this will give me a lot of needed perspective. That held me over for about a month, where I was like, oh, actually, you know what? I was a little crazy when I was first thinking about that. This has reset me. I'm just going to vibe. I'm past this. I don't need to think about this anymore. And I was good just being done with it. And then about a month after more reflection, and especially as seeing how, you know, modern things have started to kind of come out, I've instead come back around to the fact that maybe the leftists were right all along. We are in unprecedented times. This is batshit crazy. The worst fears that people had about ICE and the alt-right and the markets crashing and reducing globalism and all of the big, bad, spooky boogeymen that we were supposed to be afraid of with a Trump administration that everyone wanted to just write off as like, oh, we're all just, everybody is in a climate of just thinking of the extremes. So we're only focusing on the worst, and the worst of both sides. Who knows? Whoever gets in, I'm sure they'll do good things either way. That has not happened. That's not happening. The country is being like completely torn apart by the seams, and it just, the average voter, I don't think thinks enough about this, especially thinks about this ahead of time, like I was a couple months ahead at least considering this. The average voter was led astray, and they're not able to keep up with all of the torrent of news, especially when so much of it is just garbage and lies and misinformation, and you never even know what's actually happening. Pulling everyone away from understanding who our candidates actually are, understanding what their policies actually are, with any sense of true, like, forethought or any idea of how it turns out, even though we have a lot of systems set up in place to try and protect things, you can get a lot of shit changed very quickly, okay? So, with that understanding, hopefully this can be a wake-up call now that, yes, guys, you can't just take 4 years of someone bad. There's a lot of bad shit that can happen in 4 years. We're seeing how much bad shit that can happen in 6 months. We need people to wake up politically and understand that if you try not to engage with politics, if you think that's not for me, you are unfortunately part of the problem. You need to have an opinion. Part of the way that society functions is that we all get an opinion. So if you're not going to use yours, then you're worse than not voting. Like, I don't know. We just need to redefine and reshape how people understand how politics impacts their everyday life. I don't hope that it happens, but I see it happening with tariffs. In a couple months, prices are going to start skyrocketing. We're going to be in a situation where everyday people are finally seeing the consequences of their actions, if seeing it on the news with fucking death camps isn't enough already. Eventually, it's going to impact them day to day, and that's always the go-to, like, conservative argument, like conservative dunk is like, oh, conservatives never pay attention to something unless it impacts them directly. And I'm not trying to give credence to that. It happens to everyone on both sides, but there's something there. We need everyone to just have a little more empathy, a little more understanding that things are fucked. And just because you haven't realized it doesn't affect you that things are fucked yet, eventually it will. I should know this quote because it's one of the most fucking important quotes about the Holocaust or whatever. I think it's from the Holocaust. I don't know. I'm a fucking idiot, guys. This is why everyone should be involved, so that I'm not the idiot talking to you about not even knowing my fucking quotes. Okay? I should not be the expert, but I feel like I could be a point of authority right now, and that is not good. We need everyone to wake up to the fact to where eventually I don't need to do this shit. That is the end goal. The end goal is everyone passively now understands that this is important, and you don't need people like me screaming from the rooftops at nothing, hoping that you'll listen. Okay? But there's the quote that's something like, first they came for the Bolsheviks, and I wasn't a Bolshevik, so I didn't care. And then they came for the gays, and I wasn't gay, so I didn't care. And then they came for the blacks, and I wasn't black, so I didn't care. And then they came for me, and everyone's fucking gone, so no one could have ever saved me in the first place. That mentality is kind of where we're at right now, trying to break through with conservatives, because we need everyone to understand that just because something doesn't directly impact you every single day, it's going to impact you. It's going to impact people around you. It matters. We need to be past the past, like, 40 years, 60 years, whatever. America has been the policemen of the world. We've been like the fucking globalist guardian. Okay? How has none of that kind of trickled down to our average citizen to think, oh, we should care about all of our people and, like, what's happening, and we should care about what other people are doing? That I cannot believe that we're somehow back in a cycle of, like, American protectionism and, like, tariffs and, like, trying to reduce just the the incredible system we have in place, where honestly, like, dude, does it cost us money in military? Yeah. Does it cost us money in aid? Yeah. But do Republicans not understand the soft power that we had over the entire fucking world that we've just lost so much of due to the tariff talks, due to the fucking charade of trying to get deals and doing fake math on tariff percentages to impose on other places? Like, do we not understand that, yeah, we don't need... in my Sam Hyde video, we talked about China, and China comes up a lot. We don't need to compete with China, so instead, we're going to tariff the fuck out of them and not be able to get any help from them at all. Like, why was that the solution to we shouldn't compete with China, is to just cut off China? That is not the solution. How have we gotten to where we're at? That was a little bit of a tangent. Sorry. Anyways, all of what I was talking about, particularly the racial and the legal versus illegal tension that is being caused by the Trump White House, as well as the tons of clips of, like, every Republican important figure doing fucking Nazi salutes, like the actual salutes, that's led me back to the opinion that after 6 months of originally thinking about this, Destiny is actually way more sound in his thoughts than I wanted him to be. I don't want to be the Destiny guy. I'm not here to support Destiny, okay? But he had a good take. It's fucking true. So, now you have an idea of where I'm at, okay? I'm back at the Destiny take. I think it's a little extreme. I would love to know a little bit more specifics about Corey and what he thought and whether he was actually like an appropriate martyr. But that's all part of just this story, okay? This one event. If you extrapolate this out to thinking in a bigger picture, yes, it's unfortunate Corey died. Yes, it's unfortunate that we're in a political environment where violence and extremism is so prevalent that we have to worry about this. But there's a very important sentiment behind all of it. That is, if you are unable or unaware of what's going on, enough so that you will go and physically support a person who is tearing apart everything that we've known. Like, there is a certain amount of responsibility you have to take where if you support destructive, treasonous people, then there may be consequences. Now, how did we get to this situation where people are even considering talking about a fellow citizen like that, okay? How is it that populism spreads so much further of a net than, say, a Democratic agenda or a typical Republican agenda? Why is Trump populism so strong, so uniquely powerful, it seems? Okay? There's a clip that I'm about to play.
Now, large factions of the left condescendingly believe that dumb people are the reason Trump won in 2016 and won again in 2024. And that
well, I mean, yeah.
I think. Maybe I'll just use the quote. 28:15. Large factions of the left believe that dumb people are the reason that Trump won both in 2016 and in 2024. I would like to respond to this critique directly, okay? Dumb and uninformed or unaware are not the same thing, okay? I don't believe that people voted for Trump just because they're fucking stupid, okay? I believe that the average person does not engage with politics enough in their daily life that it's not something they register, okay? I wake up in the morning and what's going on in the news and politics and the world and shit, instantly, that's like 10 to 20% of my day, okay? I wake up and I know I'm going to be engaging with this topic for a good amount of time. Normal people do not do that. Normal people, you're lucky if you walk into work and you ask them, hey man, did you see that this happened? And they go, oh shit, I didn't know that happened. Okay? So the average person is just not thinking as critically of politics as they should be, and they're not actively looking at the bigger picture of things when they make their choices. There is a very large amount of single-issue voters, and people don't seem to get that that is not a category that should really exist, okay? It's obviously going to exist. It obviously does exist. But the amount of single-issue voters is insane, okay? And it's going to make up a large chunk of your supporters, no matter what your agenda is, no matter what side you're on. You're going to get a lot of people who only care, oh, the right likes guns, the left doesn't like guns. I always vote right because I like guns. I understand that that's a thing, and it makes politics really easy for a lot of people, and it's fucking more destructive than almost anything else I can think of, okay? Yes, there can be issues that are more important to you. Yes, you can have, swings because of certain opinion issues. But I'm sorry, I lean left. I still like guns. I still vote left because guess what? We still get guns. Guns are not going away. We're getting rid of little restrictions and things. And I understand that Republicans typically like lower government. They don't like intervention. They don't like regulation. They don't like shit like that. So any form of pushing gun control or gun regulation is going to be met with a lot of criticism, as it should be, okay? I fully understand the Republican argument behind why they will never vote against guns. And it's because it's protected by our amendments. It's important to protect against tyranny, things like that. Very foundational beliefs of our system. that sometimes, especially younger people, don't understand or don't realize yet. I fully support that. While I don't believe that single issue should be how someone votes, I understand that it is a thing, and we cannot just blame people for doing that. Instead, we have to find a system that incentivizes people caring about other issues or educating people further on why you shouldn't just be stopped at one roadblock. Politics has many different categories of things you have to deal with. You're not just voting for, hey, if the guy at the head, if my president loves guns, then I know for sure we're going to be fine with guns for 4 years. The president, at the end of the day, is not the guy who's going to decide whether gun regulation goes through. There's a lot of other parties and people that you also vote for that are going to be more impactful in that decision. But people just think president is the politics. My guy likes this kind of party, like this agenda. I'm going with this guy. When given a choice between an agenda and populism, populism is always going to spread a larger net and gain much more support quickly, okay? Whether over a certain amount of time take, 10, 20 years. I guess taking 10 would be interesting because Trump has been around for about 10 years in politics. When, over time, you would hope that an agenda retains voters more, keeps people more informed, is more structured. Populism, instead of having very detailed plans or an overarching plan for things, typically promotes rapid change and common sense. And those are the kinds of things that are buzzwords that sound great. But people who understand how politics actually functions and work, we need to make it more apparent that populism and propaganda and bad actors are still prevalent in the modern world. When I was going through school and we're learning history, you learn about all these horrible people, and yet no one ever really seems to talk about the fact that there are horrible people still. They're just not in the history book yet. While it's important to know what all these horrible people did, what might be even more important... Oh, did I just freeze? No. Anyways, what might be more important is... Fuck, where was my point? No, that screwed me up so bad. What might be even more important is understanding what led up to them being able to do these horrible things. How did they get into power? How do they get people to rally behind them? Did they really have such foundationally strong ideas that people wanted it and then they fucked it up? Did they just lie to people? These kinds of questions are way more important to stopping bad actors than the systems in place that we have to stop them. If your people are aware of the tricks that bad actors use, that's way stronger than a system in place that should hopefully slow them down or make things more difficult. Obviously you would need both, but we're lacking very much so in the department of people understanding how to identify good and bad politics, good and bad messaging, good and bad just framing, there's tricks, there's a lot of patterns that populists follow, and a lot of the time in history, their promises are not met. So if you're starting to hear certain rhetoric, certain forms of making promises, it might be red flags that you need to be able to identify that we currently are not able to identify. Although populism is going to spread much faster, this does not mean that populism is the answer. And understanding that is supremely important to having a functioning, consensus-driven government where both sides are actually able to work together. That is the goal. In case you have forgotten that the goal of government is to help all of us that don't get along to get along at least somewhat. That is the point. Understanding that populist messaging, rallying support behind only a handful of issues, promising rapid changes of course, these tactics are not stabilizing and are typically not beneficial for a country, especially one like us who's been on the top of the world for the better part of 60, 80 years, okay? We have systems in place to change things, gradually and over time. And while everyone is going to be upset at the slowness of bureaucracy, it has to be understood that the time invested in it to have the security behind it it ultimately leads us to better outcomes than the currently extremely volatile system or like situation that we've placed ourselves in. Trump changing economic policy day by day, or, rash thinking and acting with like little thought to consequences, those kinds of things are not beneficial to the average American citizen. Are we having fun watching the news right now? No. We wake up and we hope that the world doesn't crash today. I hope that when I look at my stock account, it doesn't go from like 10 grand to like 2 grand because he decided to say something fucking stupid. Like, this position that we're in is not one that I've ever seen us be in before, okay? The rash thinking and acting with little thought to the potential consequences, particularly those on the average little guy citizens, leads us into this horrible spot where I do not understand how people can continue to support what is happening. Although it seems that the media and education and many institutions in the country are currently being waged war against, it is imperative that people on both sides of the aisle are aware that attacks on these types of institutions to help to lower public perception and support for them, that is inherently destabilizing. That is bad no matter what you think of the institution. Losing a fair media environment, having news channels like Fox that claim in court they are so outlandish that they shouldn't be considered real news, waging war against the education system as indoctrinating when education is one of the best ways to stop growth and spread of dangerous ideas. All of these things fighting against this should be red flags that populists are not looking out for you. They're looking out for themselves. They will continue to push their agenda in ways that benefit them personally and by tearing down things that you benefited from, that everyone should eventually benefit from. And most people are not capable of realizing that getting rid of these institutions, like, this is something that is just foundational to how growing up in America works. How do you see the future going if we remove our fair media, if we limit free speech, if we get rid of education? Like, fighting populism should be a bipartisan effort fought as vehemently as the war against communism seems to be fought on the right, okay? I like that argument because I think it really makes a lot more sense if you were engaged in like a lot of conservative media. But I want to put out the little caveat that obviously the left should also speak out against the very far left like communism. But the main idea, fighting populism, should be a big bipartisan effort that is more important than fighting for your guy, okay? It's okay to lose the election and give up power for 4 years than to instead have like a puppet that is pushing nothing that your typical agenda pushes, but at least in like some sort of theory you can say you won. This is not how the world should function. In the aftermath of the beginning of Trump 2.0, Trump's admin 2, I have unfortunately regressed back to believing that the Destiny take should have been seen as more realistic and truthful than it was. Trumpism, or more particularly this form of populism, is the boogeyman that the right makes communism out to be, a destructive force working in the shadows underneath your noses to sow discord and discontent and tear down the current system with something new. While I would not support communism, I also would not support whatever the alt-right mirror image of it that we're heading towards now is. At 8:08, we discuss, are Democrats looking for a populist candidate in 2028? I think that there's a very interesting discussion to be had about the security that offering an agenda brings versus the idea of constantly running populists. I am not sure which is more effective. I've teeter-tottered back and forth. Populism is a very large topic with a lot of examples, both positive and negative, through history. Obviously, though, it seems that agendas work slower, they tend to be more rigid, and they can become more divisive than populists. The idea of running off of just like one main promise, instead of you having a party of people like candidates running on the collective, we have a set of ideas that are all fairly normal, and then I choose these issues where I have a different take. That is much more what I would deem like running on the collective, okay? Here's what we can do for everybody. This is all important. But many populist figures work on getting support through one focal issue rather than these kinds of agendas that like place out a bunch of different policies on different topics. There's a lot of inherent risk in this form of campaigning. The risk is that when everything is said and done and the president has control, not just the one good thing that they were promoting to you is what's going to be pushed into law. We've seen this with the reactions to the tariffs and the stock market with Trump, because a lot of Republicans are starting to back down from supporting him because of it. The markets are going down. People are saying on Twitter and things like that, on social media, it's not being a Democrat to say that the tariffs are fucking us. Republicans are having constant infighting currently over whether or not tariffs are the breaking point. And it seems that a lot of people would still rather be wrong and put their head in the sand and say tariffs are going to be fine than to be a Democrat, quote unquote, or agree with Democrats that this economic policy is not sustainable, is not what we should be doing. That is not how that is not how this should work. We are not enemies. Okay? We are allowed to have the same opinion sometimes, especially when it's on something as fundamental as the economy that affects us no matter what our stupid culture war issue bullshit is, okay? The tariffs have fucked up your retirement. They fucked up my retirement. They fucked up everybody's retirement. They fucked up everything that you've tried to grow for at least the last 20, 30 years, okay? Everything is potentially going off the rails because of this. And it'll be very interesting to look back at this in, say, 10 years when we know the outcomes and see if this is just extremely, like, maybe I'm completely in the wrong and overblowing this. It doesn't seem like it. We are facing issues that ruin all of our lives on both sides, and there's still people that are considering not, like, converting to being a Democrat. I don't need you to be a Democrat. I don't need you to believe in everything I believe. I need you to realize that this is not the answer. I don't care if you would rather have had Vivek Ramaswamy, another fucking idiot, or I would have been fine if they bring back Mitt Romney. I don't even know if he still exists. But give me somebody, anybody but this fucking guy, okay? It's okay to say you made a mistake. It's okay to realize that what he promised you is not what he's bringing you. It's okay. Just fucking say it out loud with your whole chest so we can get out of this situation.
Now,
If you were a better person, you wouldn't be at a Trump rally. You feel me? So, yeah.
if you were a better person, like me, a person who thinks people who disagree with me should be shot and killed, then this wouldn't have happened.
At 1734, there's a quote, "If you were a better person, then you wouldn't have been at a Trump rally." There's a following quote, "If you were a better person like me, one who thinks people who disagree with me should be shot and killed." ... This is where I don't like the argument that the left-leaning side has taken, okay? This pushes it over the edge for me. There's unfortunately many reasons that someone might have been at the Trump rally, and while by supporting him, I do now think that you take on a small part of the responsibility of everything that happens because of him. Corey could have been a normal Republican voter just there to support the Republican candidate, okay? He might not have been aware of all the hate that he spreads. He somehow might have not been aware of all the like crazy shit that was proposed during the campaign. He might just be the Republican guy that cares about his guns and then went to the rally because it was 20 minutes away, okay? I hear this case, and I truly, truly want to communicate that there is a distinction that exists where some Trump supporters are extremists and some are not. while I don't believe that even the extremists should be killed over their beliefs, Trump, by promoting the extremist beliefs and the extremists themselves, they show up in support of that and create a situation in which dangerous events can happen. If you're not part of the extreme part of that group, then you should be aware of what is happening within that group and be aware of the risks associated with being involved in such an inflammatory political movement or environment. When Democrats when you think back to like civil rights movements and protests and anything like that, people know going in, they're defying the government, they're protesting what's happening. There's a chance they get shot, there's a chance they get jailed, there's a chance they get fucking like a car drives through them because other people are that crazy. If you support the candidate who is stoking the flames like of hatred so vehemently and purposefully, then you are unfortunately putting yourself in the line of fire for if retaliation does happen against such an inflammatory person. It's very reminiscent of the First They Came For story that I mentioned earlier, and it seems that many Republicans hide behind the shield of ambiguity for why they might support Trump, while actively denying or avoiding the very inflammatory things that he has said and done. I do not have much sympathy for those who engage with and support Trump, and I have so little, in fact, that I really hope most of those that have been enticed with him have been misled and are either uninformed, propagandized, or brainwashed. But even with that being said, it is important to remember that average people fall for propaganda, and we should not be angry at an individual for their support or really attempt too hard to convince people out of their convictions. It's instead better for us spent as like the Democratic, like left, as just an entity, all of us opposing Trump. We need to rather ensure that institutions are kept in place that make sure that future generations are going to be able to look back at this as a good example and analyze and understand what led to this, okay? We are living through Trump. We cannot change that. We've tried. We've impeached him. We've found him guilty of crimes. Nothing is going to get rid of him. He has Supreme Court immunity now. We can ensure to the best of our abilities that the next time a Trump jester comes around and tries to get popular support by peddling to extremists and fringe groups, that more people are going to be aware of where this can lead so that we can prevent this. I'm sure this has been an issue that everyone history repeats itself. We go in cycles, okay? There have been people, there's bound to have been people back in, Nazi Germany, back before then, whenever there was other oppressive regimes. There's always people who are fighting not for now, but for the future. And unfortunately, I don't particularly see how I can be of benefit right now. I instead have found that the way that I can feel like I'm making an impact is by trying to set up others in the future to understand what led us to where we're at. And although, especially I'm sure during this, especially because I had some tangents that we'll see what makes it, what gets cut, you'll see more emotion from me in this video than in a lot of my other videos where we're talking about policy or talking about just like things that I find interesting. While I find this interesting, and I think that this will serve to be a very kind of useful tool to start to understand why populism spreads and how to avoid and how to potentially like stop populism from spreading in the future. The biggest, where was I going to end that with? Although there's not a lot that I feel like I can do right now, I think that by making all these videos and trying to get these kinds of thoughts more into the public's mind, into the zeitgeist, it's going to hopefully allow future generations to not run into the same issues so that they don't have to face the same like economic peril and like moral division of their country that we're currently seeing. And history repeats itself, so it's hard to believe that that will be the case. It makes it feel like it's kind of futile to even try, but it can't be. There has to be a point where things get so bad that people have to listen and have to remember. And hopefully this is the starting point, the very starting point of when to get like all of us can come together and say, this was a mistake. We need to remember this. We need to fix this. And hopefully we're able to get there at some point.
Maybe Kamala Harris just fucking sucks. You ever consider that? Maybe going, nothing's gonna change when I'm president.
All right, I have 2 final points. One's going to be pretty quick. At 32 minutes, there's a clip about maybe saying when I'm president, nothing will change. Sucks. And that's a dig at, Kamala's campaigning, which I have my own issues with Kamala's campaign. We can talk about that in a different video. I'm not going to get bogged down in that right now. But what I get out of her saying nothing will change, we were doing pretty good, man. If you look at the S&P, it's been going up. The last 2 or 3 years has been fucking crazy growth. The last 10 years has been American exceptionalism when it comes to stocks. We handled COVID pretty fucking well. Saying that you plan on continuing many aspects of the Biden administration was not it was a much more damning call to make than I ever expected it to be. Because things weren't perfect under Biden, but they were a lot more stable, and we had very established goals, especially economically, which were going well. Jerome Powell and the Fed are doing pretty solid at keeping up with inflation, especially after the fucking COVID mess. And I don't see what we were doing particularly wrong. The entirety of the second Trump campaign feels a lot to me like the grass is always greener situation. Things weren't perfect under Biden, and people underestimated how much real change Trump was actually planning on implementing. So we'll see how everything plays out, but at least in the beginning, the saying is proving to be very accurate, that the grass is not always greener on the other side, because it's starting to feel like we don't really have grass over here. We might be just chilling in crabgrass, chilling in weeds.
I am not a reliable voter. I will not vote blue no matter who. And guess what? Most of the country is like me. Does that scare you? Good. Me not being a reliable voter is not an excuse for Democrats to not listen to voters like me. If anything, it's the complete opposite. They should be trying to get the votes from people like me. Politicians and parties are not owed your vote. They have to earn it. They have to work for it. And many people thought the Democrats did not work.
I'd like to conclude on this point, which began with the quote, I am not vote blue no matter who, and a lot of the country is like me. I wanted to conclude on this because I think it's really important to understand how this question was framed and how it was used in the video, as well as how it's used in modern discourse. I completely agree with the idea that the Democratic Party is in shambles right now, and it's not been the leaders that we need. However, and even with this being the case, and on top of that, also, I am open to candidates from both sides. Even though I lean left, I still am very I am not your average voter. I feel like I inform myself much more than the average person. I like knowing the nuance of everyone's takes and how it might actually affect what we do. I fail to see how Trump and any of his policies or positions keep normal Republican voters around or got swing voters to come around, unless the swing voters were extremists. It is the blatant racism or the sexism or the coup or the felonies or any of that not enough to get you to vote blue no matter who? I'm not a blue no matter who person. I would have been anyone over Trump person. I would have voted for any Republican over Trump, okay? You could have given me a fucking, can't, like, Plank from Ed, Edd n Eddy, put up fucking Plank on the stand against Trump, and I would have voted for Plank, okay? Perhaps it's a failing that after almost 10 years of Trump being in our political sphere, I truly do not understand how he has ever had as much support as he gets. But I have failed to be shown any evidence that he's done anything actually beneficial for the country. And it seems that many people on both sides, when I talk to them, also seem to have very few answers as to what's been meaningfully done that could be considered a net good, a positive for both sides, a good thing for all people. He's extremely partisan, and so obviously people are going to be happy that their party's getting things done sometimes, but although we are partisan, we might have differing ideals. The government should aim to push what they believe, but also offer some sort of flexibility so that the minority power, can attempt to still, get things done. Everyone should be working together to attempt to ensure that there's some level of what's good for one of us is good for all of us, okay? That approach to issues is not the approach to issues that the Trump admin has. And it's not even that they are, just a little bit passive aggressive towards the other side or anything, or they try to write off their ideas or anything. No, they are expressly opposite to everything that the other side believes in. This level of I don't know how to say it, the scale between how far away normal right and normal left are now is insane. It used to be a lot more they're here, and now we're at the point where we're at here and no one wants to work together. While the Democratic establishment has failed us, it's important to send the message that did it really have to come at the cost of potentially ruining the democratic experiment forever and throwing away all of our pre-established global relationships and global goals and soft power? Is Trump and what he's pushing worth us doing all of this long-term damage? Do you think that just when Trump leaves and we get someone else, whoever's next, that every country is going to be oh my God, it's so good to see he's gone, let's go back to working with America? No, we've undermined all of our security and trust with anybody. We're fucked, man. And I just don't understand how people can support the isolation that we're about to put ourselves in. I truly don't get the I am not vote blue no matter who argument, because I wouldn't have cared if you voted blue. You could have voted for a different Republican. We could have put up someone else, anybody else. And if I just don't get it. I don't know how to end this any better. I don't know how to conclude this. I don't know how to move on. Thank God I have one more point and we can end on that, because how the fuck am I supposed to end that? So, can this all be solved, or are we doomed? While I've already addressed this a little bit, I don't believe that it is exactly each individual's fault that they got ensnared into this populist propaganda trap. While I have been very strong in my words around the Corey situation, and I have a real conviction over the idea that supporting this guy for no matter what reason has opened the floodgates to exceptionally dangerous things to take place, I am not looking to stoke violence or have a call against Republicans or, have you go out and fight your active Trump supporters, your local Trump supporters. But instead, we should take this example and all the surrounding rhetoric that came before it as a sign that there needs to be more political and historical education for the masses so that the average person is not so easily ensnared by these empty promises and this form of propaganda in the future. And that's what this all comes down to is, do I believe that people actually genuinely fell for Trump and support him? Or do I think that a lot of it was able to be manufactured? And I believe wholeheartedly that a majority of his support has come from manufactured issues. I believe that they've been able to use this, rally of angry support to push very, very dangerous ideals and principles. The Supreme Court has already given up more power than it ever should have to him. The federal judiciary system with all the judges is constantly coming after him. He's been charged with a million felonies while as sitting president and while in between terms. The fact, he never should have been able to even run a second term. He really shouldn't have. I'm starting to think back, because, technically a felon is not allowed to vote, so a felon should not be able to run for, positions. But they can, because loopholes, I think. I don't know. Are we doomed? Guys, are we doomed? It feels like we're opening ourselves up to a lot more risk than we would have been opening ourselves up to if we had just remained with Biden or Kamala or a sensible Republican or somebody normal. Guys, I understand there's a certain level of disconnect between politicians and the average person, and that's kind of accepted as oh, my politician's always going to be a little bit out of touch. This is not out of touch, guys. This is fucking insane. We are in the most dangerous time that I've ever been alive for in our political sphere. I would not be surprised if over the next 4 years things become very scary, very fast, very authoritarian. I truly hope that I'm wrong, but we have plans to make 5 more holding cell things, essentially detention camps, concentration camps, whatever you want to call them, in El Salvador. There's rhetoric around starting to deport American citizens that are criminals to these El Salvadorian prisons. We've already seen it. It's honestly lucky that the main El Salvadorian guy that is the headline of all these stories of why this is such a big issue right now, it's honestly a surprise that he was found alive. And I don't have any inclination that the administration is going to do anything positive within its 4 years. And what's even scarier than that is that if Trump croaks, if Trump doesn't make it, I'm not sure if I trust anyone behind him to do any better. I almost want him to be able to stay alive the whole time and remain power, because at least with him being crazy, it's somewhat, I don't know. It feels like he is much more selfish. He's doing it for him and his the benefit of his cronies and his friends than let's say JD. If JD were to now come to power, he was not exactly people were saying that Kamala shouldn't have been able to run as the Democrat nominee because she wasn't voted for in the primaries. You kind of voted for her because she was the vice president. Guess what? The same argument can be made for JD. We didn't really vote for JD. JD is fucking scary. He's batshit crazy too. So we're stuck between a rock and a hard place, and in between the rock and the hard place, we're dealing with setting up concentration camps. So now you get to decide whether you're better off living with the guy who is actively setting this up, or if you're better off living with the guy who is supposed to be his successor, who might be just as destabilizing, if not more destabilizing than Trump, just because he is more of an unknown factor. He's also younger and can attempt to keep power for longer. He could turn his vice presidentship into a presidency, into another presidency. We're down the rabbit hole of what far-right populism brings, and I am scared. So, thank you guys for watching. Hopefully, there was some point that you got out of this. Most of the time, I attempt to make my videos pretty pointed and stay on topic. I feel like while discussing this, I went down a couple tangents, but I really feel like this is probably the most emotional topic that I've covered so far. And so, yeah. If you have anything you'd like to say, feel free to like, comment, subscribe, do all that jazz. Follow the Substack. That's more important than any of the YouTube shit. Please follow the Substack. Currently, I don't take any money. There's no way to give me money. The Substack eventually growing will hopefully be the way that I monetize this. So please follow the Substack. And if you have any comments that you'd like to make, but you're afraid that it's going to like break YouTube or something, or it's going to get like moderated away, because that does happen on a lot of political stuff, especially when it's very, kind of fringe, kind of extreme, kind of rhetorically strong. Feel free to email me too. There should be an email either on the screen or in my like YouTube information box. Go ahead and email me there. Thank you guys for watching, and we will see you guys next time. I think next we're going to try and finish the tariff video to go along with the price control video, but it's difficult because so much is happening with tariffs that every time I finish scripting out a like modern part, more shit happens, and I'm like, okay, maybe we'll give this another 2 weeks and then we'll come back and do it. So thank you guys so much, and we'll see you next time.